Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to extract some incredibly powerful, highly actionable leadership lessons from a rather unexpected source. We are diving into the deeply personal journey of a figure named Ilyan Marr. We're going to trace his evolution from being this isolated, almost mythical hero, literally a solitary force trying to carry the entire weight of the world on his shoulders, to becoming a vulnerable, accountable peer within a structured community. So whether you're leading a startup, managing a new department, or honestly just trying to foster better team dynamics, Ilyan's transition from a soloist to a symphony is absolutely a masterclass in building sustainable, trust-based structures.
Okay, let's just jump right into this by asking a crucial question, one that really every new organizational leader needs to ask themselves when looking at their team dynamics. Are you shouldering everything completely alone, acting like a solitary hero? Or are you actively building a resilient team of equals? It's so easy, especially when you have unique skills or a really strong track record, to accidentally build a throne where everyone basically just waits around for your directive. But as we'll see through Ilyan's story, relying on a throne, well, that's just a recipe for eventual collapse.
So, to unpack how to build sustainable community structures, our explainer today is going to follow this roadmap. First, the myth of solitary leadership. 2, refusing the pedestal. 3, integrating critics. 4, training through gentleness. And 5, defeating sabotage. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The myth of solitary leadership and the very real danger of founder syndrome. For the longest time, Ilyan genuinely believed that operating entirely alone was the safest route for absolutely everyone. But here's the thing. This isolation was really just a dangerous disguise for hidden pride. It allowed him to easily hide his mistakes. Then, an event known as the First Scatter happened, awakening ordinary humans with raw, unchecked powers. And it was then he realized that true survival meant confessing his past failures to these new peers. He had to show them that survival wasn't about being flawless, right? It was about seeking help and fostering actual trust. Because, as he discovered, failing in front of your peers is exactly what fosters genuine group growth. When these ordinary people started gathering in the unclaimed hall, a character named Meridas looked right at him and said, "You have become a category." Oof, that hit Ilyan hard. He suddenly realized he was no longer just a solitary miracle. He had become this daunting, intimidating standard. And you see this in organizations all the time. When a leader operates as a lone genius, they unintentionally create an impossible standard. Others don't feel empowered. Instead, they feel inadequate, constantly measured against a category they literally can never match.
Which brings us to Section 2, refusing the pedestal.
This introduces what we'll call the friction of equals. Enter a newly awakened individual named Vorn. There was this night when a group of deeply frightened citizens actually knelt down before Ilyan. But before he could even utter a single word, Sela stepped up. Using her gate voice, she sharply commanded the crowd, "Stand up." And instead of getting defensive or rebuking her, Ilyan did something amazing. He respectfully bowed. He honored her correction in front of everyone, proving to the entire room right then and there that true power actively refuses to build a throne.
Then we have Bran Ister. Bran was dangerously burning himself out, trying to carry everyone's pain entirely by himself, using his burden blood. Ilyan literally had to step into his path to physically stop him. He told him, "If your gift requires you to become the only back in the world, then your gift is learning pride through service." Man, what a line. Ilyan was showing Bran that trying to carry everyone's pain isn't actually leadership at all. It's a trap. It's martyrdom disguised as service, just to avoid being ordinary. You have to be willing to let others carry the weight too.
Moving on to Section 3, integrating critics and holding anger together.
Now, most traditional models teach you to silence resentment, right? Push it under the rug. But a truly resilient community actually integrates its fiercest critics. Take Vera Sorn, for example. Her power awakened during a terrible massacre that Ilyan completely failed to prevent. She stood in front of him and said, "It was not hope. It was abandonment catching fire." Instead of defending himself or making excuses, Ilyan just let her anger stand in the room. He recognized that managing peer critics by truly listening to them is exactly how group accountability remains strong.
And that philosophy directly shaped their completely new community structure, which they called the Council of Witness. They didn't put Ilyan on a throne. Instead, right at the center of the room, they placed an empty chair representing consequence. The rule was that no decision could pass until potential harm was actively acknowledged. By incorporating fierce peer critics like Vera, this individual accountability prevented the formation of destructive power hierarchies. Just imagine that for a second. What if every major corporate decision required an explicit, mandatory acknowledgement of potential harm before moving forward? That is a total game changer.
That brings us to Section 4, training through gentleness and personalized development.
Inside the unclaimed hall, raw power wasn't trained through brute force, but through gentleness. Because remember, these weren't hardened warriors. They were ordinary professionals. You had Oren Pell, a baker, Tavia Hesh, a sailor, Rook, a stable hand. Ilyan quickly realized he couldn't just force them to emulate his old battlefield tactics. That would be a disaster. Instead, they needed to develop their raw abilities through the everyday tools, objects, and habits they were already intimately familiar with.
So they structured their training around 4 core principles. Number 1, start with stopping. Survivors measure strength by preventing disaster. Number 2, practice the absolute smallest possible use of power. 3, obey gentleness. And 4, treat failure as data, not doom. By practicing in these tiny, heavily controlled ways with everyday objects, they learned how to set firm boundaries, they learned to fail safely, and that transformed failure from a source of shame into the very engine of genuine group growth.
Finally, Section 5, defeating sabotage with vulnerability.
Enter the demonic crowns. Now, in an organizational context, you can think of these entities as toxic market forces, aggressive rival competitors, or even malignant internal gossip. When these forces saw humans forming a real supportive network, they specifically targeted those new relationships. They exploited human connections to foster suspicion, doubt, and isolation. They whispered lies to harvest loneliness. Because they deeply understood something fundamental. A decentralized network can be totally ruined by suspicion long before it ever has the chance to solidify into a true fellowship.
This all culminated in an ultimate test when a demonic entity launched a massive psychic siege directly into Ilyan's mind, basically offering him the comforting, familiar illusion of his old solitude. Naturally, his first instinct was to fight it off alone, but then he stopped. He completely dropped that hidden pride, and for the very first time, he vulnerably called out for help. Sela rushed in to close the Whisper's path, Bran carried the residual pain, Nerys and Mara secured his mind. By allowing his peers to save him, he transformed what could have been his breaking point into his greatest leadership breakthrough. His personal transition from isolation to total dependence was finally complete. To defend against this kind of external sabotage moving forward, they officially formed the Fellowship of Unborrowed Flame, anchored by 3 simple vows. First, no awakened human belongs to another power. Second, no power is justified by the pain that birthed it. And third, no one explains their gift without listening to those affected by it.
They maintain trust not by building higher walls, but by radically deepening their accountability to one another. And when Ilyan signed this charter, he didn't sign it as the founder or the Grand Master. He signed it simply as a witness.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. As you step out to build or lead your own teams, you face the exact same choice that Ilyan Marr did. Will you choose the illusion of the solitary hero, hiding your mistakes and pride, acting as the only back in the world and trying to build a throne? Or will you choose the vulnerability of the symphony? Are you willing to step down from the pedestal, actually integrate your critics, and be brave enough to fail in front of your peers and ask them for help? Because true leadership isn't about being the loudest note. It's about making space for the entire orchestra. Thanks for joining me, and I challenge you to ask yourself today, who do you need to invite to your council of witness?